0W20 or 5W30? The brutal truth about oil in Toyota hybrids. If you own a Prius, Camry Hybrid, RAV4 Hybrid, or Lexus Hybrid, you've probably seen this. The oil cap or manual says 0W20. The old-school mechanic says, nah, run 5W30, that thin stuff is only for fuel economy. The internet says everything. So what's actually right? Is 0W20 some fragile, cafe-standard scam oil that only exists so Toyota can pass fuel economy tests? Or is 5W30 outdated thinking that's slowly chewing up your cold start wear margins and hybrid efficiency? I'm GearHead. I don't worship spec sheets or old-timer dice. I care about what's happening inside the bearings, under hydrodynamic lubrication, when your engine is cold, hot, idling, and bouncing on and off in hybrid duty. If you want that level of understanding before you dump random oil into a $3,000 engine, make sure you're subscribed. This is exactly the kind of small decision that quietly shapes how long your hybrid actually lasts. Let's break down 0W20 versus 5W30 in Toyota hybrids, using words like viscosity, shear strength, and CAFE standards, but in plain language. First, what do those numbers even mean? 0W20 and 5W30 are multi-grade viscosity ratings. The first number with the W, 0W or 5W, is the cold temperature rating, how the oil flows at low temperatures. The second number, 20 or 30, is the high temperature viscosity rating at operating temp, usually measured around 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees Fahrenheit. So, 0W20 means in cold conditions it flows like a zero-weight oil, which is very thin for cold starts. When hot, it behaves like a 20-weight oil, providing a thicker film at temp than a 20. Viscosity is just resistance to flow, thick honey versus thin syrup. But inside your engine, viscosity is life or death. Why? Because of hydrodynamic lubrication. When your engine is running, the crankshaft doesn't actually ride directly on metal bearings if things are working right. Instead, it floats on a microscopically thin wedge of oil. As the journal spins, it drags oil with it, building pressure in that wedge. That pressure keeps the metal surfaces separated. That's hydrodynamic lubrication. You want that oil film thick and strong enough that metal never touches metal once you get up to speed. Too thin at high temperature and under load, that oil film can collapse, and now your expensive engineered surfaces are kissing each other. Bad. Too thick when cold, the oil may not get where it needs to go quickly, and the pump has to work harder to push it, which matters at startup. Toyota spec'd 0W20 in most of their modern hybrids for two big reasons: cold start protection and fuel economy and regulatory pressure from CAFE standards and global emissions targets. Let's talk cold start wear first. Almost all of the wear in an engine over its life happens at cold start. Why? Because the oil has drained down from where it was. The metal parts have contracted. The oil is thick and not fully flowing, and the engine fires and asks for load before full hydrodynamic films are built. Every second the engine runs at low oil pressure and poor flow is where the damage creeps in. In hybrids like the Prius and Camry Hybrid, you get a lot of start and stop cycles. The engine shuts off at a light. The engine turns on to assist acceleration. The engine shuts off while cruising electric. The engine turns on again for a hill. So compared to a non-hybrid, you have more transitions, more mini coldish starts, even if the engine is warm. A thinner cold-rated oil like 0W gets up into the valvetrain and bearings faster after a shutdown, especially in cold weather or on those short on and off cycles. That means less boundary lubrication time, which is metal brushing against metal with only a microfilm, and more time in proper hydrodynamic lubrication. Run a thicker cold oil like 5W30 in a climate that actually matters, and you can delay oil reaching the top of the engine on each restart, have slightly worse flow through tight clearances, and increase startup wear, especially in the valvetrain and cam phasers. Now let's talk about shear strength, because this is where the old school argument comes in. People say 0W20 is like water, it'll shear down to nothing. 5W30 has better shear strength.
Shear strength in oil terms is how well the oil maintains its viscosity under mechanical stress and high temperatures, especially in places like cam lobes, bearing clearances, and high-load hydrodynamic film zones. Old, cheap oils could shear down quickly. A 30-weight might behave like a 20 after a hard interval, but modern synthetic 0W20s from reputable brands are shockingly good at maintaining viscosity over time. Add to that, Toyota hybrids, especially Atkinson cycle engines like an Prius or Camry Hybrid, are understressed most of the time. They run cooler combustion, lower cylinder pressure, and rely on electric assist for torque. They don't beat up the oil like a small turbo engine cranking 20 psi all day. So, a good quality 0W20 synthetic in a Toyota Hybrid will hold its viscosity across the oil change interval, protect under normal hybrid loads, and flow quickly at startup. The "it's too thin and has no film strength" claim doesn't hold up if you use a proper API and ILSAC approved synthetic 0W20, you follow sane change intervals, and your engine isn't an abused sludge monster. Alright, but what about 5W30? Is it ever a good idea? Let's be honest, there are cases where stepping to 5W30 might make sense, but you need to know what you're trading. 5W30 is a bit thicker when cold versus 0W. In typical climates, the difference is small unless you're in serious winter. It is noticeably thicker when hot, being a 30 weight versus a 20 weight at 100 degrees Celsius. That higher hot viscosity can offer a slightly thicker oil film under high load at temperature, a bit more margin if your engine is already worn and clearances have opened up, and possibly lower oil consumption in an engine that started burning 0W20. So, if you have a high-mileage Toyota Hybrid, some minor oil consumption, you live in a hot climate and do a lot of highway driving at steady speed and have no frequent stone-cold starts in sub-freezing temperatures, your argument for 5W30 could be, I want a bit more film thickness at temp, and I'm willing to give up a tiny bit of miles per gallon and some cold flow advantage to slow consumption and add margin. That isn't insane physics-wise. But here's the brutal truth for most owners of relatively healthy Toyota Hybrids under 150,000 miles. 0W20 is the correct choice, and it's not just some cafe trick, it's what the engines were built around. You gain very little with 5W30 in a modern, tight, not worn Prius or Camry Hybrid engine. You may lose a bit of efficiency, you slightly increase cold start wear in fringe conditions, and you're going off-spec, which, if something did go wrong, Toyota could absolutely use to deny goodwill help. Another angle is hybrid duty cycle. Toyota hybrid engines spend a lot of time at low to mid-load, jump on and off, not idling in the traditional sense, and sometimes sit off while the car is still moving under MG2. When the engine does run, it often goes quickly to an efficient sweet spot, sits there, and then shuts off. It's not constantly loaded and unloaded like a normal internal combustion engine in mixed traffic. That means less average thermal and mechanical stress versus a comparable non-hybrid, more sensitivity to start and stop oil delivery, and more importance on fast, predictable oil flow at every restart. Everything about that pattern says, give me an oil that flows fast and builds pressure quickly, but still holds up at moderate load for long intervals. That's 0W20's job. Let's talk about one more thing people ignore: warranty and calibration. Toyota calibrates VVT systems, oil pressure sensors, oil pump behavior, and engine start strategies around a certain viscosity curve. That's 0W20 in most modern hybrids. If you go thicker, the oil pump might hit pressure targets differently. VVT phasers might react slightly slower. The engine control unit might see oil pressure versus RPM versus temperature curves it wasn't tuned for, and cold start enrichment and timing behavior might not be optimal. Most of the time, the system has enough tolerance that you won't feel this, but from an optimization and emission standpoint, you're off script. And if your car is under warranty and you're running non-spec oil and have a lubrication-related failure, you've given Toyota a clean-out. So, where does that leave you? If your Toyota Hybrid is relatively new, under say 150,000 miles, not burning significant oil, and living in a climate that sees normal seasonal temps, use a high-quality 0W20 synthetic that meets the Toyota and API and ILSAC specs and change it on a sane schedule. That's the right call. That's what your viscosity, hydrodynamic lubrication, and cold start wear logic all point to. If your Toyota Hybrid is high mileage, has loosened up and is burning noticeable oil between changes, lives in a warmer climate, and is out of warranty, you can have a conversation with yourself in a trusted shop about stepping to 5W30. Not because 0W20 is bad, but because your specific worn engine might benefit from a bit more hot viscosity and sear strength. But don't kid yourself. Most of the 0W20 is trash, I only use 5W30, that thin stuff kills engines talk, is stuck in the 1990s. Modern Toyota hybrids run on good 0W20 and changed on time routinely do 200 to 300,000 miles with clean internals and bearings that still look fine. The engines that die young? Those are the ones that got oil changes late constantly. They sat through tons of cold, short trips and never saw hot runs. They were run low on oil because nobody checked between changes, and they had their EGR and cooling systems ignored, cooking the head gasket. It wasn't 0W20 as a concept that killed them. It was neglect and bad usage. If this helped you see past the fit good, thin bad oversimplification and actually understand what Toyota was optimizing for in hybrid engines, make sure you're subscribed. Next, I'm going to get into something even more practical: how to set your oil change interval on a Toyota hybrid based on your actual use, short trips versus highway, climate, and mileage, instead of blindly following either the dash reminder or some random internet number. I'm GearHead. Every engine and every oil choice has a story, and together we're going to make sure yours isn't "I saved $10 on oil and paid $3,000 for a mistake later."